Hey, welcome to Hired How to Get the Jobs weekly update. Today we're going to be discussing what's going on in Washington, D.C. and how that's going to help you or maybe hurt you if you're currently on the unemployment lines. How to ensure that you showcase more than one facet of your personality during the interview process and why that's important. And then we're going to be discussing what do you do when the interview is over? Here's a hint. The interview is never over, even after you started. And then we'll be taking your questions and I'll be answering them to the best of my ability. So welcome to Hired How to Get the Jobs weekly update. Again, my name is Tony Martin. I write a blog called howtogetthejob.blog. And if you like some of this stuff, feel free to check out that content there. Also follow me on Instagram as well as LinkedIn. And of course, subscribe to my YouTube channel because it is just chopped filled now with videos and tips and tricks if you're in the job search process regarding interviewing, salary negotiation, resume writing, all those things. So certainly be taking a look over there for the latest and greatest. Now, let's talk a little bit about our federal update. What is our government doing right now to help anybody who's currently looking for a job? So if you are currently on unemployment, you are getting a $600 extra payment every single week, which is set to expire on July 31st. So obviously with the deadline vastly approaching, we must be really close to a deal of some sort. Wrong. Now, there's been lots of discussions. First of all, this is a stimulus package. So let me just first, I'm a political junkie. So I love politics and I love that sort of side. So let me do a little education on what this really is. Okay, this is not a stimulus package, okay? Stimulus package is something you infuse into the market when the economy is slow. Right now, we still live in an economy that hasn't completely opened up yet, and much of the reason why it hasn't opened up is because the government has said you can't open your business. Or if you do open your business, we're gonna put so many restrictions on it that you can't be effective and you can't make money. So this is really more of a constitutional thing under the Fifth Amendment in the takings clause. The government has taken away your business, and as a result, it's like an eminent domain. They have to compensate you for the fact that they've taken your business. So there is a lot of precedence here for you to make sure that there has to be something done by the federal government in order to keep your doors open or keep your business afloat, because they're the reasons because they're the reasons why you can't be working or you can't work right now. So according to CNN, CNN has quoted Nancy Pelosi saying that looks like that the two plans, the Republican plan and the Democratic plan, are like trying to mate a flamingo and a giraffe. Chuck Schumer has been quoted saying it's like trying to mate a golden retriever with a chihuahua. I'm not really sure why we're talking about breeding when we should just be talking about money, but the point is that there's two different plans on the table, and to the Democrats, they're just vastly different, and we can't find common ground. So what are those two plans? Well, the Democrats really still want to continue with the $600 a month up until March of 2021, or $600 a week through March of 2021. They want to do, I think it's up to $1,200 in payments for individuals, $2,400 for a family, and an additional $500 for a dependent. I think what that works out to being is about $6,000 extra a month from the federal government, and then extending the plan out to March of 2021. The Republican plan seems to be a little bit different. Republican wants to really just kind of taper down the bonus or the extra that they're giving to go from $600 to $200 a month, tied also into what you were making previous to the pandemic. So that way you don't necessarily make more on unemployment than you did when you were employed, because that's somewhat of an incentive not to get back on the employment side. And then lastly, on the Democratic side of the bill, there's $100 billion in there for educational funds, which is somewhat interesting to me because we have teachers protesting right now around the country that they don't even want to teach on Zoom. So I'm not sure why we're going to give more money, and hopefully it goes to where it needs to go, but that's on the Democratic plan. The Democratic plan also has $500 in bailouts for state governments and $375 billion in bailouts for local governments. So on the surface, that seems reasonable as well, but if you were a state that was bankrupt in December of 2019 because you can't manage your funds, that's where the Republicans have an issue with this, because they're just saying, look, you're just paying out pension plans, you're paying out failing government bodies that were already failing before the COVID-19 pandemic, and now you're using this as an opportunity to really give some more money where it's not related. So that's the federal update. I'll keep you informed as we go, and I hope that helps. Now, We're now going to go into our next thing, which is showcasing different facets of your personality during the interview, why that's important. Then we'll be talking about when you think the interview is over, what you need to be doing, and then your questions. So if you have any questions regarding resume writing, interviewing, make sure you put them in the comments. I always go to live questions first, but I do have certainly a lot of questions from my clients this week when I dealt with those issues. So let me now turn to page 2. Page 2 here. So interviewing, right? Let's talk a little bit about this. So my wife and I, we got into a debate because I am a big believer. First of all, I wanted to change the name of this little segment to say like showing your different personalities during an interview, to which I was corrected by my wife. And she said, look, you only have one personality. You shouldn't be showing more than one personality because you're not schizophrenic. And if you are, I'm sorry for you. But if you're not, you shouldn't be highlighting all these different personalities because you only have one. So then I had to Google search and define what a personality was. And it looks like it's a composition of facets of your persona. So I'm not saying she is right, but I am saying I changed the title to showing different facets of your personality. Now, why is this important? Okay, we have all interviewed for roles in our lives, and we've all had these weird conversations where they were very structured and rigid, and you just never felt like the person on the other side got to know who you were, because maybe you didn't get a chance to get comfortable and actually show them who you were. Now, I've interviewed a lot of guys who have come out of fine institutions and colleges, and some of those guys were part of ROTC or they had some military backing as part of their education. And every time I interviewed a guy like that, they'd be up straight, which is fine, but then every answer would be yes, sir, no, ma'am, yes, ma'am. And look, we don't want to work with people who are yes, ma'am, no, sirs type of people. We want to work with people with personalities. Even when I was in the Marine Corps and you were given an order and you said, yes, sir, aye, sir, you're still cut up in the back room with your buddies. Like, I've worked with the most structured and disciplined people in my life in the Marine Corps, and I would say they are probably the most colorful personalities when they're not doing an official task or taking an official order and having an official communication. So don't pretend you're somebody you're not just because you're trying to be extra disciplined in the interview. So don't ever do that. Now, again, we don't like absolute statements, but that's probably a pretty good one. Now, this topic came up though because a couple of weeks ago I told a story about one of my clients who was leaving a company, and one of the reasons why she was leaving was after 6 years she wasn't getting any respect from her manager, and she really felt like she earned respect. And throughout the course of our discussion, it was very clear that she was a humble individual. But if she said in the interview process, why are you looking to leave? So, well, look, I work with a manager, I've been there for 6 years, but he just doesn't treat me as an equal with respect, and it's really frustrating. That's fine. But right now you're telling the person you're interviewing with that you deserve respect and you're not getting it. Now, if all of your other answers are geared around status and what you're not getting, then you're only showing one side of your personality, which is someone that should be respected and maybe feared and treated like an equal. And again, that's okay, but it's not someone that's going to be agreeable, be flexible, and going to be able to work with us as we have different things that pop up and is maybe nimble. So you need to be able to show these different sides, because if on one side you're saying I deserve respect and I'm not getting it, well, then your next answer, and you have to work these into, so when you get other questions about things you've done wrong or mistakes you've made, you need to own them and be overly owning them. Like, look, like, what was the biggest mistake I made? Shoot, I've made a lot. Thank goodness I've never bankrupted the company, and thank goodness none of them were very severe, but I make mistakes all the time. I mean, I'm human. Again, and then go into a story. But if you automatically shoot back with a specific example, and well, 3 years ago, I cost the company $50,000 when I did this, and here's my job. Again, because it's so scripted, it's not really genuine. So you got to make sure that you're showing different sides. You need to show that there's a side of you that's a leader. There's a side of you that deserves to be respected because you're professional. There's a side of you that's humble. There's a side of you that's relaxed. You need to be able to show you can mentor and lead people. I don't care what role you're signing up for. No matter what role you have, we all have opportunities to lead those around us, even if it's our peers, even if it's the time that you're doing something for your boss and you might be leading a certain task. You still might have to be a leader. So when you're interviewing, make sure that you're not so focused on one thing that you miss an opportunity to showcase something else. I've used this example before, but it's kind of like that the show House of Cards. And if you've ever seen it, in the first 15 minutes of episode 1, season 1, the main character, Frank, tells you about everybody in this ballroom who is a high diplomat or a high government official. And he tells you about how they got where they are. And then the whole rest of the show, you're seeing different sides of his personality based on what he wants that person to see. And he is showing them what they want to see. And in some ways in an interview, you kind of have to do that. Now that leads me right into what do you do when the interview's over? And if you think that was valuable, feel free to give me a thumbs up or push like on your on the feed here, because I'm going to take a sip, and I'm a words of affirmation guy, and I kind of like that. Okay, so if when the interview's over, what do you do? Well, first of all, the interview's never over, okay? You might be on probation for a while. You might get at the job, and then you're still, you're still coachable. You can still be pulled out at any time. So here is a trick that I use often. Like I just said, there's a chameleon thing, right? When you're interviewing, you want to make sure that the person you're interviewing with gets to see a personality that they're going to like. Well, when I'm interviewing you for a job, I want to make sure that I mirror the personality you show me, because I want you to be as comfortable with me as possible. Now, most people who know me can tell you I don't swear very much. I might say one swear word every 2 or 3 weeks just because, but I really don't swear. But if I'm interviewing somebody and in the first 10 minutes, he or she lays down a cuss word, I might cuss 2 or 3 times in the next 3 to 4 minutes just to make them extra comfortable with me, so that way they start showing me a facade or showing me their real self. So be aware that those are things that happen. Now, here's something I've done very often, and when I'm working with my corporate clients, I work with them to help with their corporate culture, and that when they're hiring people, they're hiring them into their corporate culture to ensure that they're going to have a good fit, and they're not just hiring on technical ability. Because we all know that if someone's a great technical person, they still might not fit with this team, because this team has a very specific persona, a very different personality, a very specific personality. So you need to make sure that the person you're hiring is going to work well with that group. So with that, when I've interviewed people, I've been, all right, for example, Joe, interview's over. You did fantastic. Do you mind if I give you some feedback though? Now, first of all, I have told Joe the interview is over, right? But guess what? The interview's not over. I'm just telling Joe the interview is over because I want Joe to relax a little bit enough to kind of let me in. And then I'll give Joe some feedback. I did a video a couple weeks ago on feedback, and if you didn't see it, it's worth watching just because you get to see my cute little daughter run into the picture and yell about her shoes. But you can tell Joe, here's some feedback I have for you. And 1 out of 20 times, 95% of the time, Joe handles it with grace and says, thank you, that's really insightful, I appreciate that. But 1 out of 20, 5% of the time, Joe will get really defensive. Joe will be like, oh, I didn't mean it that way. No, you might have heard that, but this is what I said. He just starts cutting me off and getting really excited and amped up. Even though I told Joe the interview was over, that was probably the most important part of the entire interview. Because from that moment on, I just learned that Joe is going to be really difficult to coach. And if he's getting defensive about something I heard during the interview, how much more defensive is he going to get when he's actually on the job and been doing it for 3 to 4 months and feels comfortable with it? And his boss comes to him and says, hey, Joe, this is kind of an area you need to work on. Oh, no. They don't understand how to work with me. Like I have to do it this way, and here's why. So Joe, and anyone out there, when you get feedback at any time during the interview or post-interview or whatever, take it well. Interview's never over as well, because guess what? I have rescinded offers after the drug screen, and not because they failed the drug screen, but because they treated the people at the drug screening place rudely. And yeah, okay, not just because of that. They might have treated the receptionist rudely too in my office. And then I start seeing a pattern develop here. If you're not in the value chain of Joe, and Joe doesn't think you're quote unquote important to him, then he's rude to you. I pull the offer. I've done that numerous times because we don't want to work with jerks. So make sure you treat people the way you want to be treated. The interview's never over. Educated recruiters and educated hiring processes are going to use everything at their disposal for screening out candidates and screening out bad people, because something I've always said on different videos too, the recruiter's job is not to hire you. The recruiter's job is to disqualify you. And if you're still left after that whole disqualification process, then you're probably pretty good. And then it's the hiring manager's job to figure out which person's the best with the recruiter's help. All right. Those are the 2 topics of the day. I hope you enjoyed them. Now let's get to the Q&A. I have a couple of questions here, a couple of things. Now, first of all, If you want to use this time to network, by all means, put who you are in the comments, say where you're from, or not really where you're from, but maybe what you do or what you're looking for. I think these are great opportunities for you to at least to get your name out there, and then maybe people in your value chain see you commented on something and they might come check you out and things like that. So use these sort of things. Thanks, Warren. I know Warren runs a small business, and but he's always looking for authentic people. So let me give you a little plug there, Warren. Thank you so much. I appreciate the kind words. And then Steve, what types of questions and response should we have for the final interview with the high-level executives versus the hiring? Steve, I get this question a lot, and I love covering it because it can change so dramatically based on the role. But throughout your interview process, when you are interviewing, so I think you're asking what type of questions and responses should we have for a fun. So I think what you're asking more so is when the interview is over, and then Steve says, "All right," or the interviewer goes, "Thanks so much, Steve. Any questions for me?" Now, you should have different questions along the way. You shouldn't be asking each person in that value chain the same question. So the hiring manager, you should probably be talking about stuff that he's going to be concerned about. Your hiring manager is going to be the one you're working for. So you're probably going to be asking him or trying to relate to him or her regarding some of their pain points, their pinch points, what they're struggling with. And you could probably start using the opportunity to coach them a little bit and say, "Hey, I know you're upgrading this ERP system. We did that 6 months ago. Here were some hiccups we had. Are you having the same challenges?" And you could do something like that with that value chain to make that hiring manager feel like, "Ooh, Steve knows what my problems are. He's already got solutions to questions I haven't even asked him yet." I can see Steve in this role because very often when you're trying to get a promotion or the job, it's about that person being able to visualize you in that role. And for people who are trying to get promoted inside an organization, I've seen more people get promoted because they took on the duties and responsibilities of that promotion well before they were ever even promoted. They just started acting in that role. And the CEO of the company already saw that person doing that job and said, "Yep, I can see them doing that job." So Steve, you want to make sure that you're focusing on what they care about. If you're going with the VP, they're probably more worried about the budgets, perhaps. Again, I'm stereotyping, not knowing specifically what role or industry. I know you're more of an HR person, I believe. So, and then for the VP, for the higher level, for the executive level, they're probably more worried about corporate strategies and things like that. So you want to make sure though you have different questions for each person. You don't want to necessarily just be about them. You don't want to be like, "Hey, so I've seen you've been here for 7 years. Why have you stuck around so long?" Then the next interview, "Hey, I've seen you've been here for 12 years. Why have you stuck around for so long?" And then, "Hey, I see you just got here 6 months ago. What attracted you to this company?" We all talk afterwards. And if you ask the same question, we're going to be like, "Okay, he doesn't really care," or "He didn't have anything." So always ask that. But certainly the one question you can ask at least a couple people is, "I'm really excited about this. What are the next steps?" That'll give you permission to follow up with them. It'll give you permission to have a deadline now. So they'll say, "Oh, you know what? We should know more by next Friday." Great. So if I don't hear anything by the following Monday, can I reach out to you? Yeah, absolutely. You've now gotten permission to follow up the following Monday, and you now have an expectation that's been delivered that you should hear something by Friday. Because far too often, too, we leave the interview being told, "Hey, great job. We'll know more soon." "Okay, thanks." We walk away. But what's soon? It's like, how long is a piece of string? It just depends on what the definition of soon is for that individual. So make sure you know, because you want to have permission to be able to follow up. And you should follow up after the interview immediately with an email, a personalized email to each person you spoke with, and CC the recruiter on that email. And they should also have their own personalized email. By doing something different, the recruiter is now going to lobby on your behalf. I've talked about this before, but remember, that recruiter is the only person that has seen every single candidate. Guaranteed. Now, sometimes that everyone else has seen every candidate too, but you can't be promised that every person has seen that candidate, because sometimes Steve the VP wasn't available for this interview, but Mike, the senior manager, was. So Mike saw some people, Steve saw some people, but that recruiter saw everybody. And that recruiter is going to be the one that probably has the loudest voice to lobby for the person they want to get hired. So you need to make sure you impress that person almost more than anybody else in the process. All right, do I see any more questions yet? No more questions yet, so great. So let's keep on rolling here. This week I've been working with some clients, or last week I should say, mechanical engineer or structural engineer. This is as specific as I'm going to get about him, but his question is that he's got lots of projects he's working on for major oil producers, okay? And he wants to highlight his accomplishment on his resume, but he doesn't want to give up sensitive information about how much that project actually costs because it was a competitive bid thing, and then they might have won it, and maybe it was a $2.7 billion project, and Howard hired How to Get the Job doesn't want his competitors knowing that it cost him $2.2 billion or whatever the case may be. So how can this person quantify the accomplishments but not disclose the information? A couple of different ways. First of all, you could put your resume in a functional format. So that way the accomplishment led a project of $6.2 billion over the course of 3 months, delivering it on time and on budget. And you could say what the project kind of was, but by putting it in its own functional section, it's not associated with any one of your projects below in the chronological section. That's one way. Another way for this client was he had 3 different titles depending on what project he was working on. He could have been a lead, he could have been a project manager, or an area manager. And it didn't matter which time frame, meaning like it wasn't like he was a lead for the first 3 years and then a project manager for the next 3 years and an area manager for the next 3 years. No, it just meant like sometimes 10 years, 9 years ago, he was the senior person because his schedule allowed it. Everyone kind of equal in their abilities in this team. So there wasn't actual progression, but what we could do, what we did do, is I ended up learning about the 4 or 5 projects he had while he was an area manager, the 4 or 5 as a project manager, and the 8 or 9 as a lead. And rather than, now we can list out what projects were, but then we were able to group them up and say, over the course of 18 months or 24 months, led $7.2 billion in projects, leading a team of up to 43 people. So that way you don't know which one was the 43 people, but you also know if you added all these up, it was 7.4 billion or whatever. And that really helped him be able to show his level of authority, his level of professionalism, how far he's come in his career, but without exposing precious information that he knows his client and company wouldn't want to be exposed. So hopefully that helps. Anything? Okay, good. So next question I had. How do you say I survived a layoff on a resume as an accomplishment when 90% of the team was laid off? Now, this question came this week because I'm working with a guy and he is the last of 2 people on his team. 90% of his team was laid off. And it's really important that we highlight that as an accomplishment, even though you don't want to just say as a bullet on your resume, wasn't laid off. Because, okay, wow, so you still have a job. I mean, I can see you still have a job, but the fact that 90% of your team was laid off and you're still left, that's a big deal. And that is kind of an accomplishment, not because you're so impressive, but it shows that the company sees something in you. Now, maybe you're the cheapest employee, but most likely the company isn't keeping the cheapest. They're keeping a balance of the person that can bring the most value for what they're making. So I would turn that around and say, continue to bring value to the company. 90% of peers were laid off. Now remember, there's a lot of words I skipped there because this is a bullet. This isn't a sentence. But as whatever I would do, I'd fill up that full line with information, making it sound as impressive as possible. I'd highlight that I'm still bringing value while my peers were laid off. All right. Again, we got about 7 more minutes, so if you have any questions, feel free to type them in. But Joel from Austin said, I saw your networking video on Instagram. This must have been a couple of weeks ago because I did the networking video, about 2 weeks ago. Any other ways you can network outside of the video that you mentioned, social media, interviewing, something like this? Okay, first of all, if you're networking right now, COVID-19, social media, huge. Use that. Interviewing is a way to network. Even if you don't want to work for that company, you should go interview. If they're invited to interview, you interview with the company even if you want to go. Because if the company has a bad reputation, if the company is struggling, chances are somebody that you're interviewing with isn't going to be with that company in 6 months, which means you're actually interviewing for another company potentially. So make sure you go follow through with your interviews, even if you don't want to work for that company. And when they ask you why do you want to work here, you go, look, I'm not completely sure I do. I've done it several times, and guess what? Every time I got an offer. I almost think because it's reverse psychology, but truthfully, if you don't really want the job, you're not stressed out about it. It's a great opportunity to just practice interviewing with a low-stress environment, and especially now where most interviews are going to be on Zoom anyway, you don't have to leave your house. So practice that skill whenever you get the opportunity to. But interviewing is a way to networking. I mean, is a way to network. Then there's always the traditional events, you know, the coffee shops, the happy hours, things like that. But another great way to network, which I touched on, I think on my last Instagram. Again, the Instagram is weekly themed, so I think my last Instagram on networking on whatever week I did it a few weeks ago was volunteering. So there's a couple of tips about volunteering. When you volunteer, make sure you're volunteering at something you're passionate about, okay? Just because you're volunteering at an animal shelter doesn't mean I expect you to get a job at an animal shelter. But I'm hoping that by you volunteering somewhere you're passionate about, the people who are there with you are gonna see you in your best personality. They're not gonna see you kind of just sloughing your feet, going through the motions because you don't really like what you're doing. They're gonna see you energized, enthusiastic, and they're gonna see the best version of you. Next, volunteer somewhere where you think people there share the same common values as you. Don't just volunteer somewhere to volunteer somewhere. Again, not just about what your personalities are, not just about them seeing the best side of you, but now it's more about where they work and they want to bring you on with them. Well, it's nice to know that you're going to be working with someone who you share a common interest. And a good example that I used for that Sunday was I volunteer at my church. I do the lights. We do, big production with lights when it comes to music. So we have a band on stage and we're doing music. And even though we're recording our sessions for live stream, the music is happening live, and whoever's doing lights has to make sure that they turn the right strobe on at the right time. And it's really not a big deal, but it takes some effort. Now, I'm volunteering in this group of my church, not because well, one, I'm volunteering because I like to volunteer at this church. But if I want to network, this is a really good group to network with because everybody there has the same belief that I do, which means in their private companies, wherever they work, I know that I will potentially have an ally there. And because we have the same commonalities, the same thought process, there's a good chance, not great, but there's a good chance that the culture fit is good for them. It's going to be good for me too. So by picking a place to volunteer where you have something in common with, you're going to be really networking at a higher level than just going somewhere to go somewhere. All right, 3 minutes left. Ayush from the UAE. This was more of a coaching question for him. He says, I've been recruiting for the past 5 years, and at the moment, my portfolio is not growing as it used to. My question is, what courses or certifications can I do which will add value to my career path and open doors for me in my region? So, Ayush in the UAE. I am not an expert on companies in the UAE, so I don't necessarily know what company or what roles or what classes will bring you value there. But here's what I will say. Okay, I will say that as you start to think about your gaps, don't just necessarily sign up for a course because it's a 2-week course or a 2-day course for recruiting. Figure out where your gaps are, okay? And as you're looking at those courses, make sure you're doing something that's going to make you better. Also, figure out where your strengths are and make sure that you're as strong in those areas as possible, because when you're trying to bring value to another organization, it's about finding your niche. For me, it was military recruiting, right? I came out of the Marine Corps. I hired military guys with my own staffing agency, and then I joined the corporate world. And most corporate companies said, oh, we have a military recruiting strategy. And then I asked them what it was, and it was, well, we go to this base and we hire some people, but we've never had much luck. So they didn't really have a strategy. They just said, okay, well, we're going to go to that base over there. And hopefully they have some sort of person that's qualified for our job. So I built military recruiting strategies. And that was my niche. That made me different than my peers because companies were looking for this, especially in 2008, 2009, post 9/11 stuff. Then I figured out while I was in this company, you know what? I'm not really good at emotional intelligence interviewing, which now I feel like I'm an expert on it, and I feel extremely comfortable in that area. There's always more to learn, but I feel like I know more or just as much as anyone could right now. So, but it started by me going to different workshops to grow this skill and realizing there was a gap in my company, not just me personally, but my whole company. So then I was able to take that training and then implement an entire program in my company, which then not just helped us evaluate talent to hire, but it helped us evaluate talent on talent management side for promotions to figure out if this person's going to be good in this job. It's not just about their technical ability. That's why so often when someone gets promoted as the best salesman in the company, they become the sales manager and they wash out because they can't lead people, or they don't want to lead people. They're too worried about the hunt, about focusing on the sale. So you should figure out where your gaps are. Figure out where your strengths are, find your niche, exploit your niches to get better opportunities, work on your gaps to become better, and they might become eventually your strengths. And when you go to one of these workshops, often there's breakout sessions. It's not just one topic, right? So when you find out your breakout session, then make sure that when you go to these different trainings, you pick a breakout session that you're extremely strong in, you pick a breakout session that you're extremely weak in, and then you pick out one that you're kind of in the middle on. And here's why. Because it's going to let you showcase different sides of your personality to people in that room. To the people that where you're an expert in, you're going to become a mentor and a coach in that room. And all those people at that table are going to start looking at you as you start talking about whatever this discipline is. And they're going to be like, ooh, he's really good. I need to talk to him after this because we might have something in my company for him. Or he might know somebody like him that's looking for a job. So by talking about what you're really good in, you're now getting the chance to showcase your personality of strength. Then by going somewhere you're weaker in, you're not showcasing your humility, but you're actually learning something. You're becoming better. And then by showcasing you're something comfortable talking about, it gives you a chance again to not feel stupid asking a question, but hopefully elevate the whole room with your educated question, because there are things in stupid questions, people. No one else will tell you that. I will, especially in an interview. I wrote an article about it. There are stupid questions. Go read it at howtogetthejob.blog. But yeah, so you'll be able to elevate your profile by asking a really smart question that maybe someone else in the room wasn't quite comfortable asking. So I think that is all the time we have for today. I really appreciate everyone coming and watching. So again, subscribe to my channel on YouTube if you like this content. If you like things like this, check it out. There's over 30 videos there. If you just like the Q&A, all the 30-minute or long videos, just scroll ahead to 15 minutes and start playing. I always try to put that little ticker right there up, that Q&A time, so you'll be able to know that you're in a Q&A segment. If you know anyone who's currently looking for a job or struggling with their resume, struggling with mock interviews, struggling with confidence, I've worked on a lot of confidence issues these past couple of weeks too, and if anyone's watching who's been working through those, we've made a lot of progress, and I know you feel the same way. But if you're working on confidence issues, reach out to me. And lastly, make sure you share this and send it to anyone you think that I might be able to help show them how to get the job. I appreciate you. I look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks so much.